very important discussion.
Yes, yes.
And now we are just enlarging it, of course, protecting heritage, but the meaning of it, the deep meaning of it, now we start to understand if we have to welcome to this possibility.
Right. This works now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. My name is Stefan Simon. I'm the director of Yale's Institute for the Preservation of Cultural Heritage, an institute which is cutting across the academic landscape at Yale, working alongside Yale's magnificent collections and also with faculty and students from all departments for one major aim: to enhance sustainable preservation for cultural heritage, interpretation and access in service to the global conservation community. And it's my great pleasure to welcome tonight the Director General of UNESCO, Irina Bokova, to speak to us about culture in crisis. The ongoing destruction and loss of cultural heritage in the Middle East and North Africa remains a cause for worldwide concern and condemnation. At our first workshop on culture in crisis with the Victoria and Albert Museum in London last year, almost exactly a year ago, we have discussed not only the extent of loss of cultural heritage, but also the impact of what Irina Bokova has been calling, rightly so, war crimes on the local and global society and their ability to recover and forgive. This week, the 8th United Nations Global Colloquium of University Presidents is coming to Yale, convened on behalf of United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who will have a keynote address tomorrow at Sprague, I think at 4:30. Presidents and faculty members from 30 international universities have arrived to New Haven. This year's program takes the theme Preservation of Cultural Heritage, focusing on issues of key importance to societies, universities, and major museums worldwide that are also highly ranked on the United Nations and UNESCO's agenda. The workshop on culture in crisis, which we held today, is one of the satellite events to this UN Global Colloquium, and we hope it may inform it on identifying priorities and setting out a pathway for the academic community to better collaborate for the preservation of cultural heritage in the future. Irina Bokova chose the name of the workshop as the title of her lecture tonight. Irina became Director General of UNESCO in 2009 and was successfully re-elected for a second term in 2013. It's important to note that Irina is the first woman and the first Eastern European to lead that organization. As Director General of UNESCO, Irina Bokova is actively engaged in and spearheading international efforts to advance gender equality, quality education for everybody, and combat terrorist financing by preventing the illicit traffic of cultural goods. Having graduated from Moscow State Institute of International Relations, studied in Washington and at Harvard University, Irina Bokova joined the United Nations Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Bulgaria in 1977. She has been a member of parliament in the 90s and the early 2000s. She has advocated strongly for Bulgaria's membership in the European Union and NATO, and participated in the drafting of Bulgaria's new constitution. She has been Minister of Foreign Affairs, coordinator of Bulgaria-European relations, and ambassador of Bulgaria to France, Monaco, and to UNESCO. Well, cultural heritage is the essential record, as we said today, the essential record of human existence and identity. It is actually the thread of continuity for which people search when the rhythm of everyday life has been shattered. We know that. Many of us devoted our career to the preservation of cultural heritage. It is arguably one of the grand challenges of the contemporary world, similar to other grand challenges, such as world health or environmental sustainability. Unite for Heritage, this hashtag, is a global movement powered by UNESCO and launched in last March in Baghdad, Iraq, that aims to celebrate and safeguard cultural heritage and diversity around the world, launched in response to the unprecedented attacks on heritage in the Middle East. This campaign calls on everyone to stand up against extremism, radicalization, by celebrating the places, the objects, the cultural traditions that make our world such a rich and vibrant place. You can see this hashtag in these days now all over Yale campus. With UNESCO and its Director General, we are here to unite for heritage. Join me in welcoming the Director General of UNESCO, Irina Bokova.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and all of you coming this evening to the lecture on the preservation of cultural heritage in conflict, challenges and strategies. I'm very honored to be here after this long day of discussion and also on the eve of a very important meeting tomorrow of university presidents, which will be also a happy occasion for the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, to come and to make an important speech. And of course, my gratitude first and foremost goes to Dr. Simon, to Stefan, for this very kind invitation. Last year I couldn't, unfortunately, attend the meeting in London. But I think this is a good opportunity to speak about heritage, to speak about conflict, and I would say to speak about the deep meaning that heritage and culture has to all of us. I had the pleasure of visiting the Institute for Preservation of Cultural Heritage, which is one of the world's innovators in the field of heritage preservation, and especially when we speak about green preventive conservation, sustainable preservation strategies, very impressed by the laboratories. I think your institute stands at the cutting edge of teaching and research. And I would say also that the work of the institute resonates with the motto of this great university, Yale University, which is Lux and Veritas. This resonates deeply with UNESCO's mandate, echoing the values guiding all of our action to protect the heritage of humanity as a source of belonging, meaning, beauty, and creativity for all to share. This heritage is indeed a wellspring of light and truth, essential to how we see the world and how we understand ourselves and our place in it. And today, I believe this has never been so important, because these precise values are under attack. Conflicts are changing shape today, and we are seeing the rise of violent extremism with culture and identities on the front line of new wars. We see the systematic violations of human rights, the persecution of people on cultural and religious grounds. We see terrorist attacks. We see the intentional destruction of the past with cultural landmarks bulldozed in Palmyra, in Mosul, in Bosra, in Aleppo. We see archaeological sites looted on industrial scale in Doros Europos, in Apamea, fueling illicit trafficking, financing terrorism. And I would say, fundamentally, we are seeing a new global struggle for the hearts and minds, especially young hearts and minds. This features coordinated attacks against the symbols and institutions of creativity, of free thinking. Schools are destroyed, universities are bombed, journalists are beheaded, all of this to impose a sectarian vision of faith, of culture, and of existence. These attacks on people, on heritage, and on minds are part of the same deliberate strategy which I consider cultural cleansing. This calls for new approaches to diplomacy. This calls for new strategies to build peace, to put culture on the front line of all peace building. We need to be clear about the new challenges we face and how to fight back, because I'm convinced we can. This means, first, putting words on the nature of the threat we face. Such systematic attacks against cultural heritage and diversity, used as a tactic of war, I believe are unprecedented in recent history. The deliberate destruction of cultural heritage is a war crime and should be persecuted and punished as such. In Syria, all 6 World Heritage sites have been damaged by fighting. 60% of the old city of Aleppo has been destroyed. The ancient city of Palmyra, the UNESCO World Heritage Site, endured systematic destruction during nearly a year of occupation. And we will be sending soon an assessment mission, preliminary, I would say, assessment mission, and then further on, once the security allows, we will be able to be more closer to what the real situation is and to evaluate the damage of this World Heritage Site. We know that Palmyra belongs to all Syrians, but I would say it belongs to the whole of humanity. And this is why it matters that we bring the international community together around shared values, regardless of our differences or opinions or beliefs. In Libya, at least 8 religious sites have been damaged or destroyed. In Yemen, the fabled Marib Dam and the old cities of Sana'a and Sada have been severely damaged by bombing. I would say it has not always been easy for us, for UNESCO, to shine light on this destruction, while children, women, men were being killed or are suffering. But let me be clear. The destruction of culture shows that violent extremists do not seek only to kill or seize control of territory. Their objective is the annihilation of the other. I believe this is the mark of a genocidal project, and recent attacks around the world, in Belgium, in Pakistan, in Istanbul, in Burkina Faso, in Bamako, or elsewhere, show that such violence knows no borders. Extremists do not choose between culture and people. They attack both, and we need to defend both. In January, we confirmed the destruction of monastery of the Mar Elia, the oldest Christian monastery in Iraq, in Mosul. Following the destruction, Father Paul Tabit Habib from Erbil said, "We see this as an attempt to expel us from Iraq. We know that Iraq's Christian population has dropped from 1.3 million in the year 2000 to 300,000 today. But extremists persecute not only Christians, they persecute with the same vehemence Muslims, Yazidis, Assyrians, Shebaks, Turkmens. This should remind us all the destruction of heritage is inseparable from the persecution of people. This is why we consider that the protection of culture and heritage today, when we see the rise of violent extremism, is much more than simply a cultural issue. it is a humanitarian imperative, and I would say a security issue. It is also a development and recovery issue over the long term, as I deeply believe that culture is a force for resilience, giving people strength and confidence to look into the future. I personally saw this in Mali, in Timbuktu. When I first visited Timbuktu with the French President, François Hollande, it was just 10 days after the extremists have been pushed away from Timbuktu. And I saw the suffering of the local communities when they saw the mausoleums, which have been there for more than 11 centuries, destroyed. And I promised that we will rebuild them. So we did rebuild them. I went last July to Timbuktu again to launch the restoration, the restored 14 mausoleums. And I saw the joy in the local communities and the local people. And I have to say, on a personal note, that I have, you know, my position of Director General of UNESCO always encourages governments and institutions to give me awards. I understand this is part of the job description. But when I received the honorary citizenship of Timbuktu, when I went in July, I think this was and still is one of the most cherished for me, one of the dearest distinction that I have received from the local people, because it was really the local communities that wanted to give me this distinction. And I think this is so wonderful when you see how heritage can really lift up a population, a people, communities, and mobilize them, unite them about the idea that extremism is to be fought, that there is future, that they have to look with optimism to the future, and their history is respected, is valued. And I think this is really a magnificent project, one of the most beautiful projects that UNESCO has been done in the recent years. So I would like to say once again, coming to this link between the humanitarian, the cultural, and the security link, because I do believe nowadays that we have to put the dots together between the three. We are exploring all the possibilities of every way to strengthen the linkages between peace-building operations on behalf of the United Nations, the humanitarian emergencies, responses, and all the other action that we undertake for the protection of heritage. So this precisely was the spirit of the agreement I signed just 2 weeks ago with the International Committee for the Red Cross and Red Crescent to integrate culture deeply into humanitarian operations. And this is also the spirit that UNESCO signed an agreement with Italy to establish a task force on Unite for Heritage, bringing together military and culture experts ready to intervene in crisis, and also fighting the illicit trafficking of objects of art. I think this is where we have to put together on a larger platform all the relevant partners and actors. The resolution, landmark resolution 2199 by the United Nations Security Council on the financing of terrorism, which bans the trade in cultural goods from Syria, gave us the opportunity, gave us particular responsibility to us, to UNESCO and Interpol, to lead this global effort to fight the illicit trafficking of objects of art. And we have created this large platform of working together with main partners like ICOMOS and ICROM and the World Customs Organization, the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes, and also to mobilize around us a very concrete action of member states and governments in order to strengthen legislation, to introduce new laws, or to harmonize within the European context, for example, or to strengthen institutions, to do some capacity building, and to use all the legal provisions and norms that we have in order to stop this illicit trafficking. I think we must do more. We must boost more the coordination among member states, among the law enforcement agencies, museums, auction houses, the private market. I think all this is so important to deepen the information sharing, to deepen research, and at the end of the day, to pass a very strong message that it is immoral, it is unethical, it is simply not right to trade with such looted objects. And I believe also that universities, institutes like this one, have a major role to play. We have launched with the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes the new training program for judges and prosecutors to connect the fight against illicit trafficking with money laundering, with corruption. We are working to train customs authorities, and also we are reaching out to main partners like the European Union so that they could harmonize the norms of their import controls, to strengthen their import controls. And this was a message that I passed last week when I met the President of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz, and the President of the European Commission, because we need to put all the dots together, or like the recently adopted also act by the US Congress on the strengthening of the border controls and the imports of cultural goods. We have seen a lot of progress. I wouldn't say we are there, but there is a strong momentum in this effort. Antiquities from Syria and Iraq nowadays have been seized in many different parts of the world, in Finland, in Jordan, in Turkey, in Lebanon, here in the United States, United Kingdom, France. And we all know that last year the United States returned 700 objects recovered during a US Delta Force raid on the Syrian compound of Abu Sayyaf, a Syrian financial officer of ISIS. And also there has been a lot of proof that there is a connection that exists between illicit trafficking and the financing of terrorism. Today in Iraq and Syria, we know that there are many ordinary professionals and museum workers that are risking their lives to protect their heritage. And I was just at the end of this important discussion, I know that somebody, a lady put forward the question of how we may and how we should honor this, I would say, contemporary monuments, women and men, these heroes that are risking their lives to protect the heritage. I think there is so much need to value their work, to give them support, to find ways to show that what they're doing is no less than fighting on the forefront in a military mission or in a peace building and peacekeeping mission. And that is why we need to give more capacity building. We need to train them in emergency risk management, and I would say pass a very strong message among the military that they should protect heritage. With the support of archaeologists and experts from France and Switzerland, UNESCO shipped to Damascus some 7 tons of equipment, safety boxes and materials that Syrian experts desperately need to protect cultural objects from museums. And also, as I said, we train military, we trained armed forces, and we share precise coordinates of heritage sites to prevent them from being targeted under the provision of the 1954 Hague Convention for the protection of cultural property during armed conflict. I remember the big impact that had something very simple. We printed a small passport of heritage for all the peacekeepers, for the French troops and all the other peacekeepers in Mali. We gave a very precise maps of the heritage that was there, and practically every single soldier or officer had in his pocket this very small passport of heritage. And now we know that more and more troops that are trained for peacekeeping are passing specific training for protection of heritage. This is the case with the French military. We are trying to introduce in some of the peacekeeping UN compounds particular courses for protection of heritage, because we do believe that in peacekeeping missions, when there is a need, like in Mali, once again, where for the first time we have the protection of heritage into the mandate of the peacekeepers as approved by the Security Council. I think this was a breakthrough and an extremely important effort that we made with the support, of course, of the Security Council. But the question of impunity also is very important. If we say that it's a war crime, and it is a war crime under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, it has to be, of course, punished by all the force of justice. And this is where we started working after the destruction of the mausoleums in Mali with Fatou Bensouda, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, and with authorities in Mali and Niger. And already this gives a result. The first such suspect of war crimes in Timbuktu, Mali, has been transferred to the International Criminal Court, and this case has been accepted by the International Criminal Court, and I think it's a strong message to end the impunity of such crimes. We do work with the International Criminal Court, with the chief prosecutor for Syria and Iraq. Unfortunately, the two countries have not ratified the Rome Statute, albeit we have been encouraging and insisting, but as long as we know that there are more than 25,000 foreign fighters in Syria and Iraq, and we suspect that some of these crimes have been committed by citizens of countries that have ratified the Rome Statute, that the chief prosecutor, Madame Bensouda, is very strong into her wish to make everything possible, working with the legal team of UNESCO. And I hope we have some result, because I do believe that impunity should be stopped. I think that another, I would say, side that I would like to touch upon here is that in response to these modern conflicts, as we say nowadays, of course, protection of heritage and culture is important, but we cannot do that only by, as we say, this strong military power. We need to talk to young people. We need to introduce history, protection of heritage, values into education. We need to win this battle of ideas. We need this soft power, as we say, of creativity, of education, in order to make young people unite around heritage, as is the campaign that I launched at the University of Baghdad. And I would like really to thank Yale for joining us in this very important social media campaign. We started very modestly, and now it is a campaign that is followed by, I think, more than 15 million people, mostly of them young people, over the social networks. And we think this is the way to pass a strong message to young people about culture, heritage, diversity, and also about the need of living together. Because at the end of the day, when we speak about heritage and protecting of heritage, I think we sometimes forget that the World Heritage Convention, all these 1,000 sites that are on it, and particularly, of course, I'm speaking about the cultural sites, we tend to forget that this extraordinary idea that we all are uniting around the extraordinary, the universal value of certain site, probably this is the best dialogue among cultures. We forget that this is a dialogue among cultures. This is respecting. This is about knowledge. This is about, once again, tolerance. And now with the destruction of this heritage, we kind of woke up into this idea that protecting heritage and the World Heritage overall idea, that did not exist some 45, 50 years ago, is an extraordinary way of us to know each other, to live together, and to have the feeling that we are one single community. Because we all suffer when mausoleums in Timbuktu have been destroyed, albeit they may belong to another religion, to another period, to another, but we all suffer about it. And I remember when I went to, and that is why it's so important to talk to young people. When I went to Tunisia, it was just after the revolution in Tunisia, and we did a conference on the freedom of expression, working so that in the new constitution they have strongly embedded the notion about freedom of expression as a democratic value. And I visited one school, just coming after a visit to the museum, Bordeaux Museum, who was attacked some months ago by extremists. And this is the museum, if somebody of you, I'm sure that many of you have visited and knows that this is a museum with extraordinary Roman mosaics, probably the most beautiful, I'm sorry, Stefano, that I may say some of most beautiful even in Italy, you may find in Tunisia. But I was talking to these young boys and girls, there were some 6th and 7th grade, and I said, you have to be proud with what you have here. You have an extraordinary museum, you have extraordinary heritage, you have Roman heritage, you have Phoenician, you have, of course, Islamic and all this. And one girl just put her hand and she said, but why should I be proud of a heritage that does not belong to me? It does not belong to my culture, it does not belong to my religion. Why should I care about preserving this heritage? And it is the moment when I thought that we need really to talk to these young people. Of course, my answer was quite natural. I said, you know, cultures permeate each other. People live in these places, and maybe some of your grandfathers have been doing these mosaics. Maybe you have the blood of this, the same master who has built this beauty. And there is no pure culture. There is always influences. They permeate each other. There are different stages, but we humanity stand. And now in the 21st century, we have to respect, we have to know, we have to preserve, and we have equally to preserve heritage of our culture and heritage of our predecessors and everybody, because at the end of the day, this is how humanity evolved during the ages. But it gave me once again a very strong conviction that we need to continue working with young people. We have to continue passing this message about the diversity, about cultures living with each other. And I think the strong message of the cultural heritage and the Convention on Cultural Heritage is precisely in this notion that we are different, but we are one humanity. And behind any culture, there will be, and there can be, outstanding objects and sites of outstanding universal value. So I think the campaign that we launched, and it was not by chance, of course, that I launched this campaign at the University of Baghdad. It was just a few months after Mosul Museum was looted and extremists were advancing, and we thought that we have to give hope to the young Iraqis to reconcile, to be united around some ideas, and what best than talking about heritage, particularly in a country with extraordinary history, the birthplace of human cradle of human civilization, when there was such a thirst in the eyes of these young Iraqi students to be heard, to be part of our joint humanity and of our effort. And I think we need really nowadays to bring this very strong spirit together, because I do believe that violent extremists know that culture brings people together. They know what identity is, and that is why they attack heritage, they attack culture, because when attacking it, they attack identities of people. And in the many debates and conferences recently that I have been participating, I was sitting next to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan, where with Jordan, we work in an extraordinary manner to find extremists and to work with young people. And the foreign minister of Jordan, we were talking, and he told me, you know, my young son, watching this destruction and watching this discussion, was telling me, you know, that I think these extremists destroy heritage because heritage delegitimizes them. They're afraid of history. And I think this is so true, that they are afraid of history, because history really delegitimizes them. And that is why we have to preserve and to keep it. So, I, of course, may say much more. I think I've spoken longer than envisaged, but I think that our joint work, we, international organization, United Nations agency, that has the responsibility to work for the protection of heritage and culture, the keepers of the World Heritage Convention, and many more conventions, in 54 Convention on the protection of heritage in conflict, 1970 Convention on the, against the illicit trafficking of objects of art, and many more. Institutions like ICOMOS and ICROM and ICOM, and universities and institutes that do such an important work for protection of heritage. We have a joint responsibility nowadays, because I believe what we do is precisely the antidote to radicalization, is the antidote to extremism. But we really need to mobilize young people around the idea that heritage and culture matters, and that we have to respect human rights and cultural diversity. So, being, of course, here in the United States, I can't help but mention that the World Heritage Convention, at the end of the day, is very much an American idea, because at those times, the Russell Train, I cite him very often, the founding father of the World Wildlife Fund, was saying something very important. He said, as the fabric of human society seems under attack by forces they deny the existence of a shared heritage, World Heritage holds out a contrary and positive vision of our human nature, a new sense of kinship with one another as a part of a single global community. So maybe I will stop here. Thank you. So maybe you could share something with me? Usually they say questions, but maybe you share something with me? Or you have, I'm at your disposal. I'm very humbled in this audience, I have to say. There are so many prominent experts and people in academia, and indeed,
Well, I'm kind of surprised I'm first. I see this from a different angle altogether. I'm a home improvement contractor. I've worked with heavy equipment, carpentry, carving limestone. I gave a limestone sculpture to the university. It takes a long time to fabricate these things, where cultures in the past used to rally around a community and spend years and years building a cathedral or something else, or a pyramid. I don't think young people see much of a profit for their own future when they get absorbed. You turn around and in a sculpture class, they're looking at a phone. No offense, ma'am, there, but but how can, if I pay to go to sculpture studio, how can you get students in poor countries to be paid to do such a long-term project, to sculpt something, to replace something, or to whatever other type of art, when there's such a bombardment for the immediacy? And I've worked on some, small sculptures just for myself that take months. So, just how do we reverse paying to go to art school and paying people to restore culture? I guess is how I would ask.
it's a very interesting angle. I haven't thought about that angle, to be frank, but
Well, that's why I brought it up.
No, that's perfectly a legitimate question, but how I see it, I think I don't believe that people look, when they talk about some of these things which are very dear to their heart. I'm just once again coming to Mali because Mali is very kind of left an imprint, but it's not only, of course, Mali. But I think they see it as part of their identity. It is not something that is different. They couldn't imagine continuing living without it. And it is the same in very many parts of the world. I could give you another example. In Uganda, in Kampala, in the capital, there is a tomb of one of their kings, which was burned down. It's not an extraordinary from the point of view of something majestic, but it was so important for the Bugumba people, for the local people. It's a World Heritage Site on the UNESCO Heritage Site. I've been there twice, and we are starting to rebuild this. It is so important for them that I think they will do anything to rebuild it, to reconstruct it, because they cannot imagine their future without it. It's part of what they are. I think if we give to the young people where they do not feel connected to this heritage and to their culture, the sense of belonging, I think they will be more resilient either to extremism or to any other, I would say, future challenges. You remind me, when you say, put this question, you remind me when I went to Baghdad to launch this campaign, Unite for Heritage, I met the Prime Minister, Al-Abadi. And I have met him several times, and I went to see him, and I said, Mr. Prime Minister, you have a problem. You have a problem. You should know better why these extremists are gaining ground. What is happening here? How? Because he launched the National Reconciliation platform, and with all the factions, and Iraq is torn by internal conflict, animosities, and I said, how are you going to overcome, and can we do something to accompany you, to help you in this national reconciliation? And you know his answer? He said, you know, you can do a lot. Help us introduce in textbooks history and culture. We left this aside. He said we were much more into natural sciences, in mathematics, because we, UNESCO, have a big office there. We work a lot, and we were helping them precisely introduce STEM, as we say, mathematics, technology, skills, which is good, it's important. But he said we totally neglected the social sciences. We totally neglected history. He said our young people even don't know Iraqi history. They don't know who are these Yazidis, what is happening here in this country, what is the history of it. And he said we need this if we want to make them tolerant and a true guardians of what Iraq has. So I think we have a lot of work to do in this. We take it for granted in many places, but I think we really need to reconnect communities, young people, with heritage. It's a huge task, but we have to do it if we want to have a more peaceful and world and countries and communities and peoples. I would say it is with themselves.
Hi, thank you for being here. You spoke about individual criminal responsibility in the context of Mali, and I know UNESCO has also spoken about the responsibility to protect R2P for states. I'm wondering if you could talk about how you see those two intersecting, individual criminal responsibility and responsibility for states, and what circumstances might be addressed by one or the other.
Well, it's a complicated topic. complicated because it's on one side, of course, we have the International Criminal Court, the Rome Statute and everything. And generally, I think if we speak about international law, if we speak about rule of law, and I think it's very important nowadays to speak about the rule of law, we have to just not let impunity be the name of the game. So I think it's very important. If we say that destruction of culture, deliberate, is a war crime, then we have to put, so to say, our efforts into making this really work. A responsibility to protect is a concept that was adopted by the United Nations in 2005 with the good idea, I think, wherever there is a grave situation, where there is mass violations of human rights or genocides or something emerging, so that the United Nations could anticipate and possibly prevent. I think still there is a need for a debate on how to implement this. There is on the modalities, and particularly when it comes to heritage. We did organize one such expert discussion to explore the possibility of can we use this as a framework and to think about possible protection of heritage. And in fact, I wouldn't say that this prompted us, but this encouraged us to sign this agreement with International Red Cross just recently. I think this enlarges the possibility of changing the mindset. I think there is still a lot of need to thinking. Can we use it? In what circumstances? Where the member states will agree to this? So it opens some doors for discussions, but I wouldn't say that we have a very focused and clear understanding. Under the circumstances, we were exploring all different kinds of possibilities. We just wanted to do something because sometimes we are frustrated. They destroy, something happens, and we're helpless as if. So this is where we were trying to explore, including this concept of responsibility to protect.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your personal feelings as well as your professional. And just in answer to the question that the first person asked, of how to engage people in what is a long-term activity. When I spoke earlier, I was saying about, during today's session, how long it can take for reconstruction to happen. But one experience I had when I worked for the Heritage Lottery Fund in the United Kingdom was working with stonemasons in cathedrals. And cathedrals have taken, when you look at how long it takes to build a cathedral, it's hundreds of years. And then they decay over hundreds of years. And I happened to experience, in Gloucester Cathedral, they have a stonemason's apprenticeship yard, and it's still a combination of French and European people working together. And the head stonemason's called Pascal, and what we were able to do with the Heritage Lottery Fund was to pay for apprentices to be stonemasons. People who didn't know they wanted to be a stonemason, but having tried it, they loved it. And some of them now have been working 10 or 15 years, and they eventually will be there. And so actually, it's actually getting them in young to find something they will do, but actually to invest in the long term. And that is perhaps the answer. And that you asked us to share something, so I'm just sharing it. There is no question.
Perfect.
Hi. I have a few questions. Well, as you have talked about your area of study and your program, and we all know that this is the Fertile Crescent and had, rich with the stories of Gilgamesh and, a few out of this Sumerian culture, but, as I'm assuming a historical, would you call yourself a historical preserver or historian, how do you go about trying to implement somewhat of a trust? I know this gentleman and also a few others have spoke about like how to go about the reconstruction of, you know, going about finding the funds in order to do so, because I know we have a problem with that here, you know, finding funds for Ernest Hemingway and Dr. Seuss's house, Edgar Allan Poe, and so all of these artists we fight for, but we have no funds within our government in order to do so. So that's a question that I had for you today.
Well, with funds, the sky is the limit. We all need funds, constantly. For reconstruction, for rebuilding. But I think that nowadays there is a better understanding of why it is needed to protect many philanthropists and countries and are dedicating funds. Sorry?
I'm sorry.
Well, I think social media is, of course, a very powerful tool nowadays to pass whatever messages, and that is why we launched this Unite for Heritage campaign to raise the importance, visibility, understanding why it is important, why it matters. It was not targeted to raise funds, it was more oriented towards young people, to mobilize young people about this understanding. You know, we speak about extremism and we speak about hate speech and everything. We thought that this is a way to change the language, the narrative, to give a different narrative to the young people about culture, cultural diversity, heritage, not that much to raise funds. But at the end of the day, this gives, I would say, passes a strong message of why it matters to millions of people. So anything helps.
Okay. Thank you very much for the very exciting presentation. You mentioned Iraq and Syria and the terrible destruction of most of the cultural heritage of these countries. And I'd like really to know what UNESCO is doing right now for saving what can be saved from the cultural heritage of these two countries, and how you envisage the role of Jordan as a bordering country for both Syria and Iraq, like we, to protect and safeguard the cultural heritage of Syria, and how we can get involved with the UNESCO efforts, how can be integrated the role of Jordan with UNESCO. Thank you.
At the beginning of the conflict, the crisis, when we saw that destruction really is growing, with the support of the European Union, we established in our office in Beirut, which is a regional office, an observatory for Syrian heritage, but we have an office in Amman also, quite a strong office in Amman with good, I would say, expertise in cultural protection. So both offices are working in order to monitor the situation to the extent possible. We have established wide partnerships starting with UNOSAT, the satellite organization of monitoring some of the sites through a connection of experts, of course, when the situation allows to go visit. It was not possible until now, and also through these partnerships that we have. Now that, for example, Palmyra is not anymore in Daesh's hands, of course, we were talking to Mamoun Abdul Karim. I think you had also him today. I spoke with him over the phone a week ago also, and we are constantly in contact with him. I will be sending a first mission, very modest maybe, from colleagues from the World Heritage Center. The problem, as we understand, is the mines. There is a lot of mines around and it's very dangerous. But at some point, of course, we will send a broader international mission to see particularly the situation there. But it's not only Palmyra. We hope now that with the, hopefully, the moving forward with the peace negotiations, we are constantly in contact with Staffan de Mistura, the special envoy of the Secretary General for Syria. I spoke with him also a week ago, that we want him to keep us abreast so that the very first moment we can go to Aleppo, and we have already had a couple of expert meetings on Aleppo also to try to assess the damage from people from Aleppo. So we are trying to use, we work also with the one humanitarian organization, Geneva Call. They work on reconciliation with warring parties. They talk even to Daesh, to all these people. They worked in Colombia before that with FARC, and we established an interesting cooperation with them in order to try to pass this message among warring parties to preserve heritage. So we're trying to be innovative and to reach out to all these different partners. But definitely Jordan is a neighboring country, and a country that also makes an enormous effort for the illicit trafficking, and we very much appreciate what Jordan is doing for that matter, because it's one of those transit countries affected by this criminal activity. I think Jordan can play a hugely important role. Illicit trafficking is number one. The other is, and I very much appreciate the initiative that the Crown Prince took about youth radicalization when Jordan was member of the Security Council, and now continuing with this very important topic about youth peace, radicalization. So I think Jordan plays a very important role, and we have excellent cooperation, of course.
Let us thank Director General Irina Bokova for the presentation and the lecture. Thank you so much for coming.
I feel the need to thank you.
And then I think, because we have such a tight program in the United Nations Global Colloquium, we leave with the Director General, but we leave the stage for Professor Laura Wechsler.